I am now pleased to invite the President of Kenya, William Ruto, to give his intervention.
The President of Switzerland, the President Zelensky of Ukraine, Madam Vice President of the United States, heads of states, ladies and gentlemen. 79 years after the international community established a multilateral institutional framework to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, Russia's invasion of Ukraine has been a horrifying spectacle of carnage and devastation, which has left 500,000 people dead and 7.1 million people displaced in its wake. Across the world, people and nations are enduring the negative consequences of disrupted supply chains. Kenya's position has been clear and unequivocal from the beginning. Russia's aggression against Ukraine is unlawful, unjust, and a violation of the fundamental principles of international law, which honor the sovereign equality of nations, upholds their territorial integrity, and advocates the peaceful resolution of all disagreements. Just like the war in Ukraine, the war in the Middle East has been equally devastating. So is the case with the war in the Sahel region in Africa, in Eastern DRC, in Somalia, in the Horn of Africa, and of course in the Sudan. 14 million Africans have been displaced by the war in our continent, and 2.5 million kids are out of school. This state of affairs speaks volumes of global leadership, and especially the peace architecture at the United Nations, and more specifically the gridlock at the United Nations Security Council. Today, a farmer in Kenya, in rural Kenya actually, knows there is war in Ukraine for two reasons. Number one, he paid more for his fertilizer, and number two, his fertilizer came late. Let me also say, this peace summit is a historic step in the right direction. For the first time, we have convened to talk about peace in Ukraine and not war in Ukraine. Secondly, a commitment to peace makes certain fundamental concessions inevitable. This summit should not be a meeting of just friends. This should be a meeting of both friends and foe. To succeed in this positive trajectory, Russia must be on the table, number one. Number two, an American general, Norman Swartzwelder, said, the more we sweat in peace, the less we bleed in war. It is time for leaders of the world to talk about peace, negotiate peace, work hard to build peace, and configure a global strategic framework that integrates peace as the sole means and end of human endeavor. Finally, we have gathered here and we are reminded by the Indian statesman Mahatma Gandhi, who said that an eye for an eye will make humanity blind. Just as Russia's invasion of Ukraine was unlawful and unacceptable, the unilateral appropriation of Russia's assets is equally unlawful, unacceptable, and a derogation from the UN Charter, especially for those of us who believe in freedom, justice, and democracy, and the rule of law. As we embark on this journey to resolve conflict in Ukraine and throughout the world, it's time for parties to the war in Ukraine to demonstrate good faith, abandon intransigent attitudes, and soften their positions. I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. I am delighted to hand over the floor to the Chancellor of Germany, Olaf Scholz.
Madam President, dear Viola Amherd, dear Volodymyr Zelensky, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. We have come here today to talk about peace. Peace in Ukraine first and foremost, of course, but nothing less than our global security and the rules-based international order are at stake. For Ukraine, defending itself for over 2 years against the Russian aggression is an existential fight to secure its free and democratic future, as Russia denies Ukraine its independence, its territorial integrity, and its very existence as a sovereign nation. This illegal war of aggression has shattered peace and brought imperialism back to the European continent. While this is a war in Europe, it has, as we have witnessed over the last 2 years, far-reaching global consequences. This war has endangered international food and energy security. It has put the threat of a nuclear catastrophe back on our minds. It has weakened global economic growth and highlighted the fate of the most vulnerable of innocent civilians, unlawfully displaced persons, in particular children and prisoners of war. This all comes to show. This war affects us all. That is why I describe the Russian war of aggression as a Zeitenwende, a watershed moment. But how to end Russia's war against Ukraine and achieve a just and lasting peace? Let me share some reflections with you today. First, no country wants peace more than Ukraine. But let us be honest, peace is more than the absence of war. An immediate ceasefire without serious negotiations, without a roadmap toward a just and lasting peace, merely on the basis of so-called new realities, would only legitimize Russia's illegal land grab. In the end, this would result in yet another frozen conflict, a scenario that is unjust, dangerous, and not sustainable, neither for Ukraine nor Europe or the international community as a whole. Second, some say that any negotiated peace must take into account Russia's legitimate security concerns. Let us recall that before the invasion, both NATO and the US were ready to enter into a broader discussion on European security that included all relevant countries. The aim was to promote transparency and stability and to build trust in order to reduce the likelihood of future conflict. As we all know, it was Russia that chose war over diplomacy and dialogue. So let me be very clear, whatever the perception of one's own security concerns may be, these concerns must not and cannot justify an invasion of a peaceful neighboring country. Third, I would like to highlight that it is Ukraine, the victim of unprovoked aggression, that has had the courage to present to the world a peace plan. Inspired by President Zelensky's peace formula, many, if not all, of the countries represented here today have participated in the Copenhagen, Jeddah, Valletta and Davos meetings of national security advisors. And so we are here today. I'm very grateful to our Swiss hosts that we can enter into a truly global exchange on principles for a just, lasting and comprehensive peace, and on how to achieve the widest possible international support for a future peace process in Ukraine. Which document is better suited to guide us than the Charter of the United Nations with its fundamental principles of territorial integrity and sovereignty? This also includes the respect for international humanitarian law and human rights. It includes the sovereign equality of all states, the peaceful resolution of conflicts, and multilateral cooperation for the benefit of humanity. These principles are binding for us all, and they are the foundation of the international rules-based order. My last point today is on Russia. It is true, peace in Ukraine cannot be achieved without involving Russia. But let us not forget that, as we speak, Russia continues to relentlessly wage its brutal war. We all know Russia could end this war today or at any given moment once it seizes its onslaught and withdraws troops from Ukraine. To date, Russia has refused to heed our collective call for peace on the basis of international law and the UN Charter. Our gathering today is important, and I want to thank all of you for your participation. We all recognize that achieving peace still requires tremendous efforts. We should jointly seek to achieve a framework and a roadmap for concrete steps in this direction. I have compared this process to a small plant that needs watering, nurturing, and delicate care. Let us engage collectively in ensuring that this plant develops and grows. Let us use the time until our next meeting to intensify our efforts. I look forward to our discussions.